Hi, everyone. I am Tanya Tarr. I'm a behavioral scientist and I'm a Thinky Brain.
And I'm Katja Cahoon, psychotherapist, and I'm a Feely Brain. Welcome.
Welcome. This is Thinky Brain, Feely Brain, where we answer readers' questions and we present Thinky Brain and Feely Brain solutions. Yeah, so Katja, I got this really interesting question today from a reader. Help me understand procrastination, they asked. People sometimes equate it with laziness, but I find myself procrastinating for reasons that have nothing to do with laziness, mostly fear or crushing shame. What can I do to overcome it? Oh boy, what a question.
Oh, yeah, that is a big one. So, really short answer, procrastination is not laziness. Definitely
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we agree on that point, right?
Yeah. But it
So,
feels like it can feel it's been, I feel like it's been attached to this concept of laziness, which is just not accurate at all.
it's not, right? And yeah, absolutely. It's been attached to that. So I'm speaking as a psychotherapist first. First of all, we need to look, are there any reasons for it? So procrastination can be a symptom or an outcome of ADD, ADHD, especially if it hasn't been diagnosed and or treated. And that's actually the message that people with undiagnosed and even diagnosed ADD, ADHD get a lot is you're lazy, if only you did the work. But they have a legitimate issue. Huh? You wouldn't tell a person with a broken leg, hey, come on, you can run that 5 mile run, right? Depression, anxiety, performance anxiety, all those things can lead to procrastination it's in the question, out of
Yeah.
fear, right? So we want to make sure, is there perhaps a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis that is underlying this pattern? Really important. And I will say this, adult ADHD is underdiagnosed. So I have multiple clients who, once they got a diagnosis and got the appropriate treatment, which can be behavioral and or medication, it changed their life. That's why I want to put that out there. And then, of course, there are things that are not necessarily a mental health diagnosis, but still patterns like perfectionism, right? Fear of failure,
Yeah.
messages, again, we've talked about that in another episode, people learned earlier in their life. So what's your observation? I'm just putting out some sort of mental health
No,
framers here.
that's really good. I teach time management and as I was getting well over the years, because I got really sick in 2013 and I really felt like I had to do a lot to retrain my brain. And I do have all those things where I have just excessive perfectionism and things like that. I don't know, and I think we should talk about this too in a little bit, but I don't think I have ADD or ADHD. Uh, I used to joke about it, which I shouldn't have done. And then I listened to what other people, my friends in particular, who have these situations, explain their experiences. When I hear them or read about them explaining their experiences, and I look at the patterns of my behavior and I think, okay, no, I'm not, it's not at that level. But the other day I tweeted a tactic that I use a lot that I find to be really successful, which is if you find yourself stalling out on a task and not completing a task, that you can take that task and do a couple of things. One is you can attach an artificial deadline to it. So for me, deadlines drive pretty much everything that I do. And so sometimes instead of saying I'm going to do this task, be very, very specific about it and say, this task will be done by this time today. And I've done this for years now. And because I'm a nerd and I thinky brain and tracking data, like I tend to run 15 to 20 minutes late past my deadline. Not always, sometimes I hit it right on the mark. But for some of the creative tasks that we have to do, particularly when it comes to like writing and editing, it can be challenging at first to assign a time deadline to it. So that's why I say artificial, because sometimes just assigning a time deadline to something, even though you're not going to hit it, you're still engaging in a process of learning. And it does, I think, help kind of get the thing done. But again, it's the idea of sort of reducing overwhelm, giving yourself a really hard target to work on. And that if you find yourself not being able to accomplish the task by the time deadline, to actually take that task and break it into two tasks, and then attach a time deadline to each of those tasks. So I put this on Twitter and I had a couple of friends like retweet it. And then I had some folks I didn't know and they were like, oh, do you have ADHD? And I was like, I don't think so. Not sure, but I don't think so. But this tactic seemed to help a lot of my friends that have ADHD, that there is the ability to respond very well to that, and also just to specific time intervals seems to help focus the ADHD brain, according to my friends on the internet. I don't know, Katja, you're the actual licensed professional here.
Right. I mean, it's a whole assessment, right? But this is not the most scientific, but it's worked every time so far for me. Yeah. If somebody, a client or so, has some doubts about it, I tell them, read the book Driven to Distraction. It's a small paperback. And without fail, so far, the clients who actually end up having ADHD completely resonate with that book. They're like, oh my God, that book is written about me. Oh, and those clients who don't say, yeah, some of it resonates, because that aspects of ADHD we also find in other diagnoses. Trauma has a lot of distractibility, right? Because of the hypervigilance and so on, anxiety, depression. And so we have to be very careful. And of course, there are also aspects, we don't need to have a mental health diagnosis to have procrastination out of that fear, for example, or out of overwhelm. And what you talk about, chunking, breaking it down. Yep. I love POMOs. I don't know if you use POMOs. Yeah. Readers will know what that is.
I love the Pomodoro method. I love that's what you're talking about, right? The Pomodoro
exactly.
method. Oh gosh, I love it. But so what was interesting was when I was trying to retrain my brain after I was getting well from, I had a collection of health issues around basically inflammation. And then we found out later it was prediabetes. Which we successfully squashed, which I'm thankful for. But you wouldn't think that would affect your attention, but it actually did. And a lot of it had to do with blood sugar regulation, right? So I love the Pomodoro method, but the 25-minute interval it was too long. So what I did was I actually chunked it into 15 minutes. So I seem to have better success when I focus on staying on task for 15 minutes. And you can even make it smaller, right? So the whole point though, is that you got to find a time interval that's very accessible, and then sort of stick to that time interval and then expand. Because our brains, there are a lot of articles out there right now that are being written, and it happens every so often, about how our brains are totally distracted beyond repair, and that, our attention spans are the size of a goldfish and all this other stuff. And I think that science, there's a lot of cherry picking on that science. I actually think, I read other, neuroscientists and neuropsychologists and cognitive scientists, and a lot of those folks that are very established, they're like, this is garbage. Like, our brains are very plastic, and that means it's changeable and adaptive. So, it's kind of like weightlifting. So like, you want to start with an accessible increment. You want to, maybe start for 5 minutes, and then see if you can do the task for 5 minutes. And then, as you just train yourself into that time interval, and then you're going to find yourself expanding the time interval. So for me, it was like starting with 15 minutes. Can I just stay on task for 15 minutes? And what I noticed over time is that that 15 minutes was enough of an on-ramp to get into a task. And then I get so absorbed in the task, I stop marking the 15-minute increments until I finish the task. Then I go back and I mark in the task. So that helps me stay on the straight and narrow. But the other thing too is find your power phrase. I'm a huge believer in power phrases, like the phrase, the word that like disrupts the signal. And so I had a wonderful boss many years ago, and he was always tell me, and I think he's, it's something that Plato said or something, like there's some fancy person in ancient Greece or Rome that, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah. And that's a practice. I mean, that goes back to, all right, what's the underlying fear, right? What is this about? Again, I believe in memory networks, and somewhere, somehow along the line, you learned that a certain fear or a certain behavior pattern or avoidance being easier than facing it head on, right? What's the greater pain, right? That's important to look at. Is avoidance the greater pain, or is tackling it the greater pain? And usually the fear of the fear is greater than anything else. Because like once I start on something, it's like, okay, it's rolling, right? But when I find myself procrastinating, and it's often when I want to put myself out there, like make a video or write something, right? I don't have procrastination when it comes to working with my clients or, things like that. Right. Yeah. So then I really look at, okay, what is this fear about? I'm maybe afraid that somebody will say something negative, or I'm afraid of not getting any likes or any feedback or any engagement. And then I really just look at that. How bad is that? And why am I doing this, right? Why am I doing this in this particular case, to get likes, or because I believe in what I'm doing and I want to put it out there? And if it only helps one person, it's good, right? So I kind of work with that fear. The other side of it, sometimes I find myself procrastinating when I'm overloaded, right? So then there is an actual, and you know a lot more about that than I do, the time limits and so on, right?
Yeah.
You have a particular term for it that's escaping my mind right now, the upper limits or
upper bound. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, right. So if I do too much, well, is it procrastination, or am I just being realistic and saying, you know what, I just can't do this right now, but I'll put it on my plan for next week, next month, tomorrow, right? So there's also that realistic aspect, and then we're judging it as procrastination, but maybe I just don't have the capacity.
Right. Yeah. Are we being reasonable? Oh, I call it the procrastination plate. Like, that's one thing to do, right? Like, you've got a plate and it can only hold so many things. And and that comes from the phrase that everybody uses about, what's on your plate, as in what are the tasks on your plate. The other tactic I found to be really useful, it's not for everybody, but I do like doing planning and intention setting on paper with a pen or with pens and color and stuff like that, which evidently is also, according to my friends who are part of the ADHD community, that also supposedly is very successful, like to actually have
bright colors.
Right. Yeah. Bright colors and turn it almost into like a personal coloring book or journaling, like bullet journals. But one thing that I've done that sometimes people are like, oh, that just seems so redundant, is besides just attaching like a time deadline, a fake time deadline, is that I will write down what I call a strike list. So even though it's somewhere else on my notebook or on my page, if I'm not getting a task done and I know roughly the discrete task that will complete the full deal, the full activity, I will write, like, I will do this, then I will do this, then I will do this. And I put a little circle next to it, in front of it. And so that because I get great satisfaction out of checking off the list, but I call it the strike list, just like it's from theater, but it's like how you strike a stage after a show. But I have found that is helpful, even if I'm writing that list or rewriting that list over the course of a day a couple of times. The reason why that redundancy is actually useful from a cognitive perspective is you are priming yourself for action, right? And you're resetting an intention, and it's not redundant or silly or a waste of time. You're actually better priming yourself to complete the action by writing it out, if you are a somatic read writer type learner. And even if you're not, if you find yourself getting stuck, try that experiment, try it as a technique, and see if that helps get you across the finish line.
Absolutely. I have two more.
Yeah.
One is an accountability buddy. What we're doing, right?
Yeah.
There's no escape for me. I have to show up and do it. Yeah. And actually, then once we're in it, I'm having so much fun having these conversations, right? It's a blast. So having an accountability buddy, whether you do something together, right? In programming, for example, there's something called software engineering, peer programming, where you program together, right? So sometimes for clients who work in tech, I suggest that if they struggle with procrastination, works really, really well. Or just having someone to bookend with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to call you back or email you or text you or whatever.
Oh my gosh, that is so helpful. I have used that so many times during the pandemic. Absolutely. And bookending is a great way of saying, I think of it as a way of actually creating a very clear boundary. But it also can be seen as a reward. So for me, there are a couple of friends that, they're on deck, and I do the same for them. I'm like, listen, can I just put a 15-minute call at 6:00 today? Can I bug you? Then we can talk on the phone, or whatever the time is, right? To end my day. It forces me to get everything, because I got to get everything done, because I'm going to talk to Kate at 6:00, and this stuff all has to be zipped up and done. But yeah, that is, bookends are extremely effective. Yeah. Especially if you're working alone, Yeah. I
mean, that's a little bit the challenge that a lot of us have right now, right? Even if we work for a company, we might still be home alone, right? So that's where some of these strategies come in. And then bribing yourself, right? So sometimes I bribe myself. We could call it rewarding.
Reward is what they say in the literature. Thank you very much. It's reward.
I like bribing. So I'll say, if I get this done, I get to watch 2 episodes of Queer Eye, for example. I bribe myself with something that I look forward to, that I really enjoy. And then I get the work done. And I think you would scientifically call that rewarding yourself, right?
Yes, that's a
Positive
reward.
reinforcement.
Exactly. Yes. Positive. But bribing, sure. Yeah.
It brings a little levity to it.
Yeah, I like it. Well,
So,
thanks, Feely Brain. I appreciate all your tactics today.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brain. I think today we had a good mix of feely and thinky.
Yeah. We need both. It's a wild world out there.